Welcome everyone. This is Minutes with Ming. I'm your host Ming Chow, and I'm currently here with David Skinner. And today we're going to talk about the sustainability within the electronics industry. So, David, can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Thanks for having me on the show, by the way, Ming. It's great to be here. So basically, I'm here today to talk a little bit about sustainability within the electronics industry and also kind of a little bit about the term itself, what that means and kind of what that entails for companies that want to become sustainable. So, kind of starting off, basically, sustainability is kind of a catch all term. A lot of people hear it and they think environment. They think that it's all about doing good things for the environment and being a good steward to the environment. And really, the term actually entails three different components. There's the economic sustainability, social sustainability, and environmental sustainability. A lot of people forget about those other two. And it's important for companies today that really want to walk the walk to actually show that they are sustainable, to really care about all three of those things. With the electronics industry today, there's a lot of concerns about issues such as emissions from production, as well as health and welfare of employees and manufacturers. As we know, we've heard many times of Chinese factories having trouble with suicides and very poor working conditions. And this is definitely something that is big in the electronics industry. And I think that it's really important for companies to take good steps in order to mitigate that. Yeah, I was hoping to kind of talk a little bit today about how they could go about doing that.
Very interesting. One of the questions I want to ask you is about what are some examples of sustainable methods within the electronics industry, and how would you make it work in the future?
It's a good question. I'll focus specifically on Apple. That's a company I've done a lot of research on actually in the past. And some of the things that they're doing, they're actually pushing sustainability really well within their business. One thing that really stands out to me about Apple is, for example, for each of the products that they sell, you can go on their website and they actually have a sustainability report for each product. Most companies today tend to keep that on the down low. They don't really want you to know what goes into their product and what the emissions are when they produce it. That's kind of things that the average consumer doesn't care about, or they figure that consumers don't really need to know about that. But Apple will actually disclose the emissions per unit of product created, as well as the materials that they use, the quantities of materials that go into a product, where those materials are sourced from, among other information as well. And I think that something like this is a really great step for disclosure in a company, and it helps to promote what the company is doing, helps promote what Apple's doing with their products, and it shows that we aren't hiding anything. Like, these are the materials that are going into our laptops and our tablets, and we want you to know what they are. And as a consumer, I think it's important as well, because most consumers today, as you would know, they base product purchasing off price. Basically, we're just looking for the cheapest thing, or maybe the most well marketed thing. We don't think about environmental criteria as much. We also don't think, again, about social criteria. How much are these workers being paid? You don't think about that when you're at an Apple store. You're just thinking about the product. And I think that at least having this report available is really important, because then at least the consumer can now see some of that, and it's a visual way of knowing what's going into your laptop. In the future, I'd really like to see them actually introduce this into the stores, because right now you can only get it on their website and it is kind of hidden away. But I think that if they were to start doing that, that would pressure other people in the industry as well to provide reports at the point of sale at the store saying, this is what is in your product and we want you to know what you're buying.
Very interesting. I think that some disclosure or all disclosure of certain where the product's made, who made it, how it's being made, I think is really important towards give the general public an understanding, or at least a somewhat of understanding how your product's being made. Like, instead of from like documentaries, activist documentaries like that, right?
Mhm.
So about Apple, like I have some perspectives about Apple and their sustainability, and I feel like it is good that they're promoting a product, but sometimes I feel like they're exploiting their workers a lot for their cheap labor in China. And I'm Chinese, and I feel kind of passionate about
Mhm.
that and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's definitely understandable, and that is a huge PR nightmare for them right now. And they kind of feign innocence in a way, and they've said that we didn't really know this was going on. And that's the problem with outsourcing manufacturing is that you give it to the lowest bidder and say, we want you to produce this product. Here's how to do it. And then you don't really follow through. But Apple does say that they do inspect their plants. They do check their employees' welfare. It's been proven that that isn't necessarily the case in real life, which that touches on some other issues of sustainability today that I'll go into later. But at the same time, I think that they are taking efforts to mitigate that. And some of the other things they've done as well is, for example, the new Mac Pro desktop computer is manufactured in, I believe it's Texas. So it's actually made in the USA. And companies are now starting to realize that with the falling dollar and with the declining economies of most first world countries like the United States, that manufacturing here is actually not as expensive as they thought it was. And I think that with the success of this US manufacturing and the fact that their products have huge margins, so they can afford to do this, they can afford to make everything in the United States and easily make a huge profit. I think we're going to see a lot more of that coming into the future, and bringing that in-house, doing it in the United States, will definitely make sure that employees are treated a lot better as well. But for the time being, I think they need to work on more inspections. We need more NGOs involved, doing a lot more on the ground and inspecting these plants. And we need a lot more disclosure as well from China, the factories and the Chinese government, making sure that they're also working hard to improve employee welfare in China.
Yeah, I think it's not just Apple that's um situated in China. There's many other big giant
Quite a
electronic
few.
companies that like Samsung is also one of them. Um Sony is also in one of them. So
Yep.
like you gotta think about how the different companies play in the long run
Yeah.
and short term, right?
Really, they should be working together on this. It's possible maybe they already are, but I think an industry task force on employee welfare would be a really good idea as well. These companies are so big, like Apple themselves could just go one day and say, like, to any factory in China they want to, and say, you have to do this, and they're going to do it. So it's up to them to really take that first step, and they can really influence Chinese companies and manufacturers to change their ways, but they have to do it first. And from the sounds of it, they're not doing it yet. So I think that's hopefully going to be a next step for them. And I think that it's up to the consumer too. Like, make a choice with your wallet and decide on what you want to buy based on this criteria. Don't just think about the price. Don't think about just the product itself. Think about how is it manufactured and what's inside of it. And it'll definitely help you make more informed decisions when you're purchasing products.
Yes, and also like sometimes Apple can control certain policies within the electronics department or like electronic sector that can help either promote sustainability or not promote sustainability.
Yeah.
It's like they definitely have the power and the legislation to do so.
Mm-hmm.
And also, there is what I heard from my mom.
Mm-hmm.
She knows quite about like Chinese electronics. In and also and I also found out that the Best Buys, like the big giant electronics store in Best Buy, are going out of business in China because they cannot compete with the lower prices
Mm-hmm.
in the if in a total efficiency of the equipment, because they offer, like, if you buy a TV, everything's included. Like
Mm-hmm.
they give you in-home installation, free delivery,
Yep.
free fixing if there's anything goes wrong, and if something goes terribly wrong, they will replace it absolutely free for you. So if you think about that, if you add these three almost free criterias into marketing their electronic product, I think China and like people in China have like a big advantage, if you know what I mean.
Yep. And I guess that kind of comes down to really how do you sell products? That maybe the way we sell products today isn't the most effective way to actually sell things. That it is very marketing driven. It's driven by word of mouth, it's driven by promotion, and the consumer is kind of carried along for the process. There's actually a whole section of psychology based just around selling things. If, for example, things like in a grocery store, the reason you always find milk and cheese at the back is because they know that's a staple item and that you're going to go through the whole store to get there and probably buy something on the way. and they spend a lot of money and time on things like that. So I think that really, if companies are actually concerned about this sort of thing, and not to say that they aren't, but I think they're not at the level they should be, they really have the power to put a lot of money into trying to figure out, like, how do we get consumers involved in sustainable purchasing of products as well? Like, what kind of things do they look for? What can we do from our end to get them interested in that, to kind of lead them in and kind of draw in the consumer into thinking about that when they buy a product? And I think that's going to be one of the next big steps in terms of selling and psychology of selling to consumers, is incorporating the sustainability aspect, trying to figure out what it is consumers look for and kind of how to get them more involved in what they're buying.
Yes, and sometimes social media can help promote that using different type of commercials, using different type of pamphlets, town meetings to be like, hey, we're doing this something new, we're doing a sustainable way to sell a product. What do you guys think of that? And just get a general poll of like different opinions from a particular section of people or a group of people within that town and see if it actually works. If it works, it's good. But the thing is, you got to think about the economic side too. Like you cannot just go full sustainability without have like some kind of economic gain in return later. Like for example, yeah,
Yeah, that's actually a really touchy topic. I'm glad you brought that up, because that's one of the concerns a lot of companies have today. Is how much does it cost? And I think we need to get beyond this idea of always thinking in terms of costs. That kind of is a unfortunate downside of a capitalist economy and a shareholder-driven company, is that you need to maximize the profit for your shareholders. They want you to do the best you can. Any cost you have is taking away from potential revenue that you could be making, potential profit. And our economy is geared towards minimizing that as much as possible. So the problem you run into today is a lot of companies that are concerned about sustainability, they look for what's called the low-hanging fruit. And basically that just refers to the things we can really easily do without changing the status quo and without spending a lot of money. Things like, for example, like changing light bulbs or something like that. Yeah, it's going to have an effect. You're going to use less energy. You're going to have better lighting. Your employees might work better. But really, in the long run, that's not a big change. For somebody like Apple to change some light bulbs, that's like no part of their actual emissions, very little of their energy use. Really, what they need to do is look at it in terms of what benefit can we bring to society in terms of what we need to do, instead of thinking what benefit do we bring to the shareholders. And I think we're, again, starting to go that way with business today, that people are more attuned to thinking about how can we improve society, because these people buy our products. They're not happy. They're not going to buy shit from us because they don't give a fuck, honestly. They're going to be like, I got my own problems. I can't buy a tablet right now. So I think that there's a win-win for companies and consumers if they both care more about this, if they're more involved. And companies get more out of it. They have good marketing, better presence in the industry. Their consumers are happier. They're going to buy more from them. And they help the environment too. They help society. They help the economy. And then from the consumer perspective, if they're more involved in buying products that are sustainable, they're going to feel better as well. They're going to have a better life. It's going to pay dividends in terms of health and welfare for people. And they're going to feel better about themselves knowing they made a good purchasing decision.
yes, because from my perspective, that I think the electronic industry, if we don't have another power outage, I think they could change how we perceive sustainability, how we have more social innovations, and how we make people live better too. If we can use the electronic sector well in a very positive and promotional way for people to live in.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's just hard today for companies to kind of wrap their heads around that idea, because we're just geared towards money. People like money. Like, that's a fact of life. Everyone wants to have the most money they can. I don't want to go out of my way to spend a ton of money for no reason, right? Well, not to say that people don't do that, because they do, but at the same time, I think it's the same thing for companies. It's just you want to maximize the amount of money you make, and it can be a challenge to fit sustainability into that, but it's possible to do that. And then companies don't see that you can make money off being more sustainable. You can find efficiencies, you can use less energy, you can use less materials. Really small things like improving your packaging. Apple was big for that because several times now they've had several iterations of the iPhone packaging that has gotten smaller and smaller, to the point where they've saved a lot of money. You can fit more on a plane or in a cargo container if you have a smaller package, and it's more environmental. You don't need as much cardboard. or packing materials. So it's a win-win for everybody. Same product, just a smaller case. And it's things like that that companies need to start looking at more, but they're too busy thinking about the cost. It's unfortunate, but it's just how it is.
Yeah, we're kind of out of time, but I would like to say that I think in the future that everyone will have to look at sustainability along, because if we use everything up now, what will happen to the next generation, and how do we proceed from there, right, David?
Yeah. Intergenerational equity is the term for that. And basically, it's thinking about the future rather than today. And I think that if we can kind of get that into our heads, that'll definitely help us and guide us in our decision making as well.
Well, that's is the end of our podcast. Thank you, Dave, for coming,
Thanks for having me.
I'm really appreciate that you give a really positive perspective on sustainability and within electronics. And we'll see you next time, everyone.